3, 2, 1. Good afternoon. This is Tuesday, January 18th, and this is the Human Services Committee of Metro Council. I see a quorum here in attendance today. Jenny Welsh, Chair, Councilmember Benedict, Councilmember Druffel, Councilmember Hall, and Councilmember Hauser. We have 2 resolutions that we will be considering tonight. The first, and we have letters to approve on both of these resolutions. The first is RS 2022-1329 by Alan Welsh, Suara, Hurt, Hancock, and Stiles. It approves amendments 1 and 2 to appropriate grant funds from the Tennessee Housing Development Agency to the Metro Action Commission for low-income housing energy assistance program services targeted toward the elderly, disabled, veterans, and households with children under the age of 6 years. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second? Okay, great. Mr. Cox, are you here to discuss this?
Yes, ma'am. It's an amendment. Initially the date was 9/30/2021, and it was extended to June 30th, 2022. The Metro Council had already approved our funds for the low-income energy assistance program. It's where we assist Davidson County residents on their electric or their gas bill, as long as they meet the income requirements.
How much is this? Is the money for?
The total grant
Yeah.
or per customer?
Well, both. That'd be good.
Well, we do about $6 million, and it's based on points. So based on the number of points you get, let's say, for example, you get 55 points, you'll get $600 on your NES bill. That goes directly to NES. So let's say your bill is $200. Well, because you got 600, there's a credit of 400 that will go forward on your particular bill.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. So, and I don't know that this is a question you can answer, but maybe NES just implemented the Roundup. I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of the program, but basically for the rest of the year, now it's going to round up to the nearest dollar. So I just want to make sure the public understands that the most that's going to cost them is $11.88 per year. And that would be, so basically $12 per year. $1 per month would be the maximum, even 99 cents per month.
Sure.
Would be the maximum somebody pays. How does that work with this program, or
That's
is it just
it's separate. It's totally separate.
That's an NES run program?
Yes, ma'am.
This is Metro Action Commission?
Yes, ma'am.
Is
These
there
are federal
overlap
dollars.
at all? Do they take care of that need before Metro Action, before we do? Or is there any rhyme or reason as to how that gets allocated and funded for people who have needs for it?
I will have to find out more information on how it works.
I'm just curious about it, just to make sure that if we're duplicating efforts, I certainly don't want to hold anything up because this is really important. And I don't think that what I'm asking is something that should hold it up, but I certainly would like to understand, are we doubling up efforts in one area while other people are falling through the cracks? For instance, because we've got NES doing one thing and Metro Action Commission doing another. And I doubt that's happening, but I just to know and have the assurance that their program and Mac's program, you see what I'm saying, that if they're addressing some needs and we're addressing some needs, is there overlap there or are there gaps there? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I'll have to find out. Our program is specifically for those individuals who are in Harvey, and I will need to find out if there could be ones that more in general for people who would not be eligible for our program.
Got it. Okay. Yeah.
I think they're.
And since this says energy assistance, I would assume it'd be gas or electric.
That's correct.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
CM Druffel, did you have something that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think the one question I think might have been alluded to too is they wouldn't qualify for both programs, because if they could get your program and NES program, there could be some overlap where they got help from both programs. So I guess that's a question, when you check with NES, make sure there's no sense they could get both.
Well,
Or do they need both?
and as I hear you say that, like, what's the objection now that I think about, getting both? If both are needed, then I
Right.
suppose, they
Right. I
people
believe
need both,
the
but-
programs complement each other.
Okay.
And that's what the question is.
That's, I think,
Yes.
where I was going, and it
Yes.
sounds like, yep, okay.
And also with energy costs going up as well. I don't know if you looked at your Piedmont gas bill. But I can tell you, mine shot up from 106 to 170 something, and it was not the gas, it was just more cost just rising. So that's the other thing, that cost is gonna also fall to the customer as well. So that's the other thing that we have to bear in mind.
Okay, thank you.
And that's gonna have a huge impact on how much we can really help with people,
Right.
given the increase in all the,
Right.
in all the costs.
And if we go back and look specifically, what we did when we voted on that, that roundup program is more toward improvements, like if there was energy improvement needs that could be done for the home. So the crossover or overlap is low-income individuals, but one is specifically not just heat and gas, or electrical and gas, but specifically to fix things at the home that may fall into that criteria. So it allows you specifically to go in and do home energy upgrades.
To make homes more energy efficient. Thank you. And try to keep the cost down. Any other discussion? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Anyone not voting? Motion passes 7-0. The second resolution we will be considering tonight is RS 2022-1330 by Allen, Welsh, Swara, Hurt, Hancock, and Stiles. This approves Amendment 1 to appropriate supplemental benefit grant funds from the Tennessee Housing Development Agency to the Metro Action Commission for low-income energy assistance program services targeted toward the elderly, disabled, veterans, and households with children under the age of 6 years. Do we have a motion? So moved. Second.
It reads the same, I'm curious.
Yeah,
One says Amendment 1 and 2, and then the second says Amendment 1, and I think it changes the dates yet again in terms of the
Right,
extension of the
change
contract.
dates, also, that was a supplemental, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, there was additional dollars provided to customers that were served through the Lockheed program.
Okay.
So that was the supplemental benefit that was provided to them.
And how much money is that supplemental?
We were able to give $325 additional dollars to customers that have been served through the Lockheed program.
So that was on top of whatever they got through the points
Yes, ma'am.
program? Okay, the 600 or something, I think you said.
Well,
6
last
million
year,
you got
it was,
usually.
it increased this year, so last year, if someone got 500, they got an additional 325, so in actuality, they were served with $825 because of COVID-19 impact on families.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any not voting? Motion passes 7-0. We have been joined by CM Parker. Took me a minute there, I was gonna lose your name. And earlier today at the Affordable Housing Committee, after the Affordable Housing Committee, he and I were talking about our focus this year being on homelessness and what we can do from using this committee to move things further in ways that have not, perhaps in ways that Metro is not utilizing at this point. And everyone was tasked to come back with what they wanted to ask for expenditures on from the ARP funds. Did anyone do their homework?
no.
Was
So-
this homework from the last
I
council
did
meeting?
my homework. I
I was
forgot.
out with, I
Well,
think, COVID.
So I was
Specifically,
out, so
I
I'm
did.
hearing it, but I'm more than happy to contribute.
One of the things we talked about was a request that we could make through this committee for ARP funds that would specifically address some of the issues that we identify and means that we can address those issues going forward. And one of the other things we talked about is how we could possibly partner with the Affordable Housing Committee to get a broader overview to actually turn what we do use from the social services end into actual housing, moving people into housing.
I did my homework.
You did? Okay, I'll come right back to you, because we have some who didn't. CM Stiles.
So this is in addition to the 20 million that we already gave, some additional ideas in terms of funding that we can use for
Correct.
homelessness. Okay,
We
awesome
were
sauce.
trying to see how we could identify within Metro places that we could intercede earlier in the process before people become unhoused.
Gotcha.
So whether it's through CM Hauser's suggestion, going to the trustee's office and trying to determine who is delinquent on taxes and why they were delinquent on taxes, and at that point, can we put them, is there a social service component there that we can put them immediately into services to make sure we're doing everything on that way early in the process before they might actually become unhoused and lose their home.
May I ask Councilmember Parker a question?
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. So, have there been any conversations in regards to getting in at the very beginning of concerns? If someone is found to be homeless, creating housing that's even a temporary stay before we're getting into permanent housing, but a place that we can take people perhaps for 30 days, are we talking about either buying anything and renovating that out, or getting something just for that?
That's,
She's biting at the bit to answer the
Oh, yeah.
question.
well, there's 3 meetings that we talked about, if I could answer partially.
Yes.
Shulman
Sure,
had
CM
the 3 meetings, and there was, they're in the middle of trying to establish short-term and long-term goals. So to answer your question, I don't have the answers yet, but there's work on that, and you may know more, but I know Shulman had 3 homeless meetings to discuss with this, and the first one was on our short-term goals, is to do exactly what you're suggesting, is finding ways on short-term housing.
Is there any progress on that since you're the chair?
So we also had a meeting, joint meeting of the Affordable Housing Committee and this committee, and Judith Hackett spoke at length with us. I think that one thing that we found is very difficult is that not a lot of people are interested in these hotels that we want to, say, purchase, and we've got experience in that industry. Folks are not itching to sell property in Nashville right now, and then if someone is perhaps interested, once they find out that, Metro is the potential buyer, the ask skyrockets, right? Because they think it can. And I think Judith spoke at length at that meeting about sort of the approach of, I think what you're talking about is maybe a more stable situation, things like micro units, hotel conversions and whatnot, but there are some pitfalls that are recognized as best practices in just focusing on getting people into shelters, because if you don't have housing to move those people into, it sort of becomes a bottleneck, and it might not be successful. So, I would say we have a subject matter expert here. We might want to, Chair, could you speak to that
Yes,
question?
Ms. Tackett, would you like to participate?
Yes, it's really about, and all of you have heard me say some of this, it's really having this continuum, and what you're saying is really to give options. And so one of the things that you all, the Metro Council, has already approved is mobile housing navigation centers. They are up and running now. It took a little longer, which we kind of expected never goes quickly as we want and are ready to do. But there are, one is starting in Madison at City Road Chapel, I think this month, if not at the end of this month. And then one is already up and running in the Bellevue area. And some of the people there are actually on their way to housing. Since I'm not right now in the mix, I would have to, I'm here for you anytime. So if I'm happy to make calls ahead of time if I know what questions are, and I would have done so. But I don't know exactly the numbers yet. So, and that's kind of, the goal is to get people off the street, very low barrier, just what you're saying, into a church that's not a permanent shelter or anything like that, but just temporary for, the goal is to 90 days, no longer than that. If you can house them quicker, the better, and really get the services there. So, and then get them on their way to housing, hence Housing Navigation Center. And then have 3 going at the same time and move them around from different churches into different areas. So no church, that helps with NIMBYism. Doing it in small groups helps with, a lot of times people are leaving outdoors, will not want to go into a mass shelter, that's why they're not going. And nationwide, about 2%, that you can convince only about 2% of the people that are outdoors to actually go to a mass shelter. So this is kind of looking at that, but all of it has to be that housing piece. On the motel front, thinking about, could there be a contract, and I'm actually, this really didn't stress it the last time, but it really popped in my head. There needs to be some type of a coordinator who can build these relationships on an ongoing basis. So there are not cold calls from Metro to a motel owner, but somebody who could work with all of you. What are your connections? How do we get in there? So for example, right before I left, I happened to work with this motel owner, and I'm like, hey, are you willing to sell your motel or one of your motels? He's like, no, but I know all the Patels, and if you want to go and meet with them and have me introduced and da-da-da, and then I left. And it's like also, that wasn't my job, so it was really, but if you have somebody or can contract with somebody and have a position with ARP, with some dollars to purchase and really coming up with a plan around that. That could be an opportunity, and if not, it's like, is it another renovation to subsidize the home funds that MDHA is getting? They are having about $9 million to, it can be used for renovation, for some support services, but $9 million doesn't go that far. So subsidize some of that, but be really directive in what kind of population you want to serve. It needs to be specific. If you want to serve outdoor population, it needs to be that chronic population you want to start with. Go through the coordinated entry that Metro is managing for the community. So it really, I mean, I think you're nailing it with your question. Yeah.
One,
Thank you.
Did you have something? a
yeah,
question?
yeah, Judy and I started talking about this a year and a half ago, and in the hotel business, so I'm very familiar with Middle Tennessee Hospitality Association, which are the Patels. But what we realized is what we need is a broker. I mean, this is a commercial business in essence. And if you're gonna do something serious, what we came back with and went to the city, and I forgot who we talked to, is you really, if you're gonna be intentional about this, you really need a broker, because you can't. Like, I went to a couple hotel owners and I got shot down, and then I went to some of the Patel, the Middle Tennessee Hospitality Association, which is really the Asian group. And that would be the ones, because they have the smaller hotels, and they're more independents, so they would be the ones. But you really need a broker to go do that, because they know how to ask and navigate that. For us, doing that would be crazy. I used to do this in larger companies. For us to do it would be not make sense. So anyhow, if we're serious about it, I would suggest that we get with the city and get a broker to see if there is an opportunity.
And having that relationship, somebody who's really building, it's in the end, the relationship, ongoing relationship.
And I have a suggestion of someone to be that broker.
Okay. CM Bennett?
Thank you, Chair. And to a little bit along those lines, is I'm curious, that broker, my expectation would be that they're able to complete a full-on database of every operator in the city, but I wonder, are there business licenses on file that would help that broker get a head start by saying, here's all the hotels in the city that have a business license that gets filed with the city, such that then we know who they are. So just an idea that's super in the weeds, but just something to think about how we might be able to get that database robust for hotel operators here.
Just wanted to note, I believe it is a designated land use in the tax records.
Oh.
So that even if it's not zoned that way, or there's not a permit, like, it should say, the assessor went by there and took pictures of it, looks like a hotel is a hotel. So I believe that's a designated land use, but I could be wrong.
Somehow we can get to it, in other words.
There's data.
And so a broker the expectation, I think, Chair, would be that the broker is able to use those resources around, and we make sure they've got them to help them be successful.
Right.
Although, of course, their job is to be successful.
True. But that's something we can all kind of discuss, whether we think that's something that's worthwhile from, I don't know if that would be something that ARP's funds should fund, but someplace that we can find some money for that. We're gonna give a gold star to CM Hall, who did his homework.
Well, because we were talking specifically about APR money, and didn't get into overlapping with, money that had already been allocated for other things, since the conversation, especially in the meetings that Vice Mayor Schulman ran, were very specific in short-term and long-term, and then in the short-term goals, trying to do transitional housing and find something temporary to permanent. Those conversations also included Metro-owned properties, because the cost of construction from the ground up is actually cheaper than renovating. For example, if you're looking at construction costs now, you can build a shelter that's about 7,500 square feet for less than $3 million. But if you go in and try to retrofit or renovate another building, you're going to spend almost double that. But then you're still not including any wraparound services or plugging in any of the other components. So that's where we would have to pull from other groups. But specifically with APR money, we can do pilot programs. So one of the things that I was looking at was from a pilot program standpoint. California and Oregon have huge homeless populations. There are some groups that operate there that have done some really good programs. There are a couple who are doing things in the Middle Tennessee and Southeast region. 3 of the ones that I spoke with have done similar pilot programs and say they can hit the ground running and partner with anybody. They are a nonprofit, but don't need anything in terms of their management, day-to-day, that kind of thing. But from an APR standpoint, doing a pilot program with social services and solid waste, it's nobody's job to do litter in Nashville. Nobody picks up litter. We have problems with trash and recycling getting picked up and collected now. Creating transitional housing, but being able to have a pilot program for the people who are doing the transitional housing to actually be trained and work for Metro. What they've done in a similar program, and the new NDOT director was telling me about where she came from in Tucson, they have this program. They literally take the homeless, take them through a training process, identify, starting with the area where they already are, how we were talking about providing money to clean up those areas. Well, this is one of the things that came up in those meetings with Vice Mayor Schulman each night was we take them through the training process, through this pilot program. They can work for Metro part-time, picking up litter and trash and helping with trash collection in those specific areas. That helps us on 2 sides, plus the ones that are doing that program move up the list on the housing list because they're a little more stable now. They have an income. They've been through some other steps. Then that allows us to move that group faster through into some more full-time or permanent housing situations and freeing up the temporary or transitional housing for others. But we can use APR funds for that. We went back and looked at the qualifications or rules around that money, and you can use that money to create that type of program. So that was one of the things I was looking at. Like I said, the new NDOT director, she's done it. John Honeysucker and the folks at Social Services love the idea. So it's trying to coordinate with those 3 entities really quickly while there's still some money that can be utilized. And we can partner with existing groups like this, what is it, specifically this one group, Streetworks said they could do it. Then you've got this group, Family Promise, which is one of the organizations that came from Oregon that is huge.
Was that part of the flyers that they passed out? 'Cause
Yes.
I remember showing the vans where they would pick people up and all
Yep.
that.
And so they come equipped, being able to address whatever needs somebody has. It's similar to some of the stuff that Elam Mental Health was doing with law enforcement right out of the gate. And Sheriff Hall has done, great work with that. But being able to assess and identify really quickly, getting people from, do they need mental health component? Do they need something as far as documentation? Do they need that? They can identify those things really quickly. And like I said, if you've got the training and pilot program, that's an income. We've identified immediate need. To Julius, the last few years, she's been great about this conversation. Continue. Knowing each step where somebody is going to go or end up before they even get in the system or get in the process. And I think that would be a huge step in that direction.
Can you send links to some of the programs that you said have done?
I'll forward them to Roseanne to get out to
Yeah,
everybody.
that would be
I'll
great.
do that
Does
right
anybody
now.
have any questions?
And you were asking about numbers. Jay did say that I think 25 from Brookmead have been housed now.
Well, I'm not sure. He thinks it's down to 50, but we're not sure.
I just know he put out the number last week, that 25 had been, where, I don't know exactly. The question is, have 25 more moved back in? Did we reduce it by 25 or did we just
Yeah.
shuffle the cards?
I know you got to go with the full, each one, you got to sort of go all the way to get them completely housed. Otherwise, it sort of trickles back into where it was before, so you can't manage it well. But anyhow.
Does anyone have any questions or comments?
No, I think the idea is we need to keep moving and try to get it done, though.
Yep.
That should be our focus.
Moving right along, CM Rutherford, do you have any update from the Veterans Committee?
I do. I've communicated with the mayor's office, and we're basically waiting on the budget process in terms of seeing where we're going to go with the elevation of the current Veteran Service Office to departmental level and creation of a Veterans Commission at the same time. We were initially going to file legislation to create the commission. Mayor's office asked us to hold that so that we could do it both at the same time as part of the budget process. And so that's the next step, is those conversations as part of the budget process.
Great. Anyone have any questions for CM Rutherford about that? Okay, yeah. CM Stiles.
Yes, wanted to mention for Metro Action Commission that next month, we're going to be having a retreat to talk about all encompassing activities and what the budget looks like. And Cynthia Kroom has announced that she is planning her retirement. So over these next couple of years, all roads end at coming up with succession plan and what that looks like moving forward. Although I have absolutely no idea how she can be replaced. That woman is brilliant. So.
We agree.
So,
We
a
can
very
just-
well-run ship, though, having been to a couple of the board meetings thus far.
Great. Before we adjourn, at our last meeting, we talked about having someone come in each meeting and give us an update from all the different, the various layers and levels of dealing with homelessness and how we want to address that and make sure we start to get people housed. I had asked the council office if this committee could meet every council meeting, even when we did not have pending legislation, but they said we cannot going into the budget season. And so I will be scheduling people to come in. Judy has said she is very happy to come in, and anytime that we need and answer any questions and give us her expertise and help us navigate. Jay Survey said we had talked about him coming in at least once a month for a report. And he and I spoke, and he said he will be providing the council with a written report of what he's doing. He is hoping that will suffice. We will only know whether that will suffice after we see the actual first report, to see whether or not we still feel like we would like him to come to the committee and answer more questions or provide more detail or context to what is going on.
If we don't have legislation before this committee, isn't a special called meeting of this committee subject to the call of the chair?
It is, and we can do
Okay.
that, but we had talked last time about just having that as incorporated
Oh, it's just
into,
a standard.
as a
Okay.
standard going through.
Okay.
So, but that is something that we cannot do unless we have pending legislation, especially as we get into budget season and we know how long all that's gonna take. So it will be specially called meetings. But however, they also requested that all specially called meetings now be during the day, before 5 p.m., because of just the impact on Metro staff having to stay late. So that's more of a balance now, in trying to do specially called. So we want to make sure when we have a specially called, we address many issues at the same time, so we don't have to have specially called meetings all the time and burn people out, so.
Thank you, Chair. And so I guess my question would be, could we when we don't have things on the agenda, how soon, we should know when the agenda is released the prior Wednesday, does that give us enough time to say we want to have a specially called meeting on Tuesday at 5 p.m. in Committee Room 4?
As long as we can get a 48-hour notice.
Rather than us saying, hey, next Wednesday, the whatever, when, we all have special called meetings, we all the time. Is it possible that specially called meeting could be done on a council day maybe?
I will ask, but I will say that what I was told by the council office is that, especially as we approach budget season, it's just physically not gonna have the space to do that. But I can double check about that and
Like
ask whether that's just something.
Just 3:30, just before committee meetings kick off, just an idea.
If that would be something that committee members would be comfortable with and can actually, attend and do, it depends on, work situations. But that's where all that stands on that, so.
Okay.
If CM Hall will send all the links to these pilot programs, and we can look at that.
I just sent it to Roseanne.
Thank you.
the Vice Mayor, so we can get it out to.
Thank you, and if everybody else wants, I'll give you one more. You're knocked down to a C, because you missed it this time, but if everybody wants to do their homework for the next time about ARP monies that we program, what things that we might be able to, as a committee, decide and put together a resolution to request money from ARP funds.
I think it's
Chair.
partially going to depend on Jay's plan. I would suspect if he's got a plan that's going to request money, That would be part of what we need to do. Otherwise, we don't know where his needs are, if it's for
Well,
homeless.
this is true, but if you remember, we did talk about other things that we could do at a
Oh,
committee
okay.
that wouldn't be involved in necessarily in those plans specifically. Finding other ways to look and intervene using the power we have as a committee and using social services. So there going to be overlap, obviously, but, there might be other things that's not so overlapping.
Thank you, Chair. I would like a B because I didn't know the homework, but I did have a good question.
Okay,
Good.
okay,
Thank you very much.
okay, thank you. So if there's no other questions or
Okay,
comments?
who do I send this name that I am recommending to be a broker contact? Who do I send it to?
Send it to all of us, and we'll all do a
Okay.
brief background check.
Okay.
And then
'Cause
we'll
this is
figure out and we'll see.
a person who not only is a realtor and a broker, but also an attorney. And she has lived the last 20 years in affordable housing.
Right.
Probably
So-
the mayor's office would have to make that
Yeah,
determination.
the mayor's office would have to make that call. But what we could do is come up with a list of things that we feel like what that person, if we actually go that route, would have to have
Yeah, okay.
specific skills and unique skills that might be,
Yeah.
whatever. And perhaps CM Druffel can help with that because he's dealt with brokers before.
But if somebody is not familiar with the nuances of various funding programs, I know because that's what my agency does, those realtors really screw everything up. So we have to make sure whoever the broker is, they really understand all the nuances of these various funding programs, or it's gonna,
Well, I guess, are we talking about a real estate broker, or we're talking about a broker who will broker a deal?
business broker, it depends on what you're talking about. This, I'm talking
Yeah, I mean,
real
I think
estate, are
it's-
we talking business or?
Well, it's a real
I would think
estate,
it'd
if
be
you're
a
looking
real
at for
estate
hotels and
deal.
apartments type of thing, you
You
would do
definitely look at a
that.
real estate
There,
broker.
there's a real estate group here in the city, I mean, the metro office, so that really should go through them. When Jude and I started talking, what's the lady's name that does excess property and
Hannah Davis, and it's
Yeah.
now Angie Hopper, it's really that office, I
Yeah,
think.
it really needs to go through them, I mean, that's not, but we can encourage them to do something
Work
about
with
it.
somebody who's
Right.
really been in the living and breathing it for 20 years, yeah.
Right. And then what we'll have to do is figure out exactly what their mission statement would actually be in terms of what our goal would be and what we're looking for. So that's something, if people have ideas and you want to think about those and send them to me, we'll get them disseminated and maybe we can start working on doing a working document on something like that.
Okay.
If there's no further questions or comments, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. So just because I like when the vice mayor says that. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you.